The rail was bent like a broken finger. One spike still half driven into the tie. The rest of the track curling upward at a lazy angle that would send the 640 freight off the embankment and into the river. Elias Corda crouched over it in the gray pre-dawn, his breath fogging, his hands already bleeding from where he'd grabbed the iron rong in the dark. He didn't have tools. He had his hands, and about 4 minutes before the headlamp crested the hill, he fixed it. He wasn't sure how. He'd been fixing things his whole life without being sure how, finding in his palms some quality of pressure and leverage that exceeded what the muscle should allow. He'd bent the rail back. He'd driven the spike with 2 strikes of a fist-sized rock. He'd rolled clear into the scrub brush as the freight roared overhead, and he'd lain there in the dark listening to steel wheels on steel track, regular as a heartbeat, and felt something close to peace. He was 26 years old. He had been on Earth for 26 years. He had never been to Krypton. He had no memory of the capsule that delivered him, no memory of the woman who'd placed him inside it with shaking hands, no memory of the sky going white behind her as she sealed the hatch. He had only the farmhouse where Jonas and Ruth Corda had raised him, the smell of machine oil and fresh bread, and the knowledge, as deep in him as bone, that he was not entirely what he appeared to be. He appeared to be a man, tall, lean, wide through the shoulder, with a face that people sometimes found hard to look away from and then couldn't explain why. He worked as a field technician for the Meridian Science Cooperative, a civilian contractor assigned wherever the government needed someone who could carry heavy equipment into difficult terrain, and who asked very few questions. He had a press credential, technically. He'd talked his way into it 3 years ago by walking into the Meridian Tribune's bureau chief, a sharp-eyed woman named Vera Marsh, and telling her he could get into places her other reporters couldn't. Prove it, she'd said. He'd gotten into the collapsed tunnel at the Henley mine within 40 minutes, found the 3 trapped workers, carried them out one at a time. He didn't explain how he'd moved the rockfall. Vera hadn't asked. The thing about Elias Corda was that he'd spent 26 years learning to be invisible. Not literally, though there were moments in the blur of speed when he thought he might come close. He wore a particular kind of plainness deliberately. Careful clothes, careful voice, careful eyes behind glasses he didn't need. He had learned that people looked right through careful. He had also learned, much earlier, that the moment someone like him stopped being careful, the world had a way of needing something from him that the world wasn't ready to understand. He didn't want to be understood. He wanted to be useful. So when the government science division came to the cooperative with a request, an escort assignment, a weapons scientist and his prototypite device moved from a classified facility to the Aldridge University Research Complex, sensitive enough to require someone who could handle security complications in the field. Elias put his name on the list. He didn't know at the time that someone else already had their eye on the device. Her name, in the files that weren't supposed to exist, was the Spider. The files that did exist called her Dr. Seraphine Voss, consultant to no fewer than 6 government-adjacent research programs, signatory on 4 international science accords, and the most meticulous liar that Elias had ever encountered. And he hadn't even met her yet. He met her associate first. The transfer convoy was 3 vehicles, a lead truck, a middle transport carrying the device, and Dr. Marcus Lane, and a follow vehicle with 2 federal agents. Elias rode in the lead truck because nobody had explicitly told him not to, and because the lead truck had the best forward visibility. They came off the mountain highway at 10:30 in the morning on a blue sky day, and the road was clear all the way to the valley floor, and then a tree fell across it. Not fell, was dropped. Elias saw the cut at the base, fresh white wood, no rot, clean chainsaw work, in the half-second before the trucks braked and the men in the tree line opened up, not with firearms. That was the first surprise. They used something that hummed. It came from a device about the size of a large flashlight, aimed from the tree line, and what it emitted was a frequency. Elias felt it in his teeth first, then his chest, then something deeper than his chest, something cellular and wrong, like a tuning fork struck against the center of his skeleton. He had never felt anything like it. His hands went weak, the door handle slipped. He put his forehead against the window glass, and breathed and told himself it was temporary. This was temporary. He had survived worse. He hadn't, actually. But the telling helped. The agents in the follow vehicle were down before they could radio. The driver of the lead truck took a punch to the jaw from someone who'd come around, the side fast and quiet. And Elias was still bracing himself against frequency weapons bleed off when they dragged Dr. Lane out of the transport and into the trees. They left Elias. They'd looked at him, the careful clothes and the careful eyes, and they'd left him. He sat in the truck cab for 30 seconds after they were gone. The frequency device had gone with them, its effect fading like a bad dream. He opened the door, stood on the road, and looked at the empty tree line. Then he went after them. Not carefully, not invisibly. He went after them, the way he'd fixed the rail in the dark, with his hands, and something that exceeded what the muscle should allow. Through terrain that shouldn't have been passable at that speed, closing a gap that shouldn't have been closable. He found them in a logging clearing half a mile in. 4 men, 1 scientist, and the frequency device in a case, Doctor. Lane was zip-tied to a folding chair someone had brought specifically for this purpose, which told Elias the operation was planned down to the furniture. He took the device case first. He crossed the clearing at a speed that he later could not have explained and put the case behind a boulder before the nearest man had fully registered that something was moving. Then the nearest man was on the ground. Then the second. The third pulled the frequency emitter from his jacket, a handheld backup unit, and aimed it at Elias, and the humming started again, and Elias felt his knees go loose, felt the edges of his vision go gray, felt something in him that was not human complaining about the input, the way a compass complains near a magnet. He threw the boulder. Not at the man. He wasn't going to kill anyone over a kidnapping, not if he could help it. He threw the boulder at the emitter, and the boulder covered the distance in the time it takes to blink. And the emitter exploded into components, and the man who'd been holding it sat down hard in the pine needles, with a look of profound surprise. Elias cut Dr. Lane free. His hands were shaking. "Who are you?" Lane said. "Field technician," Elias said. "Corda, I'm supposed to be escorting you." Lane looked at the boulder. Looked at the 4 men on the ground, 2 unconscious, 2 sitting very still. Looked at Elias. "Are you hurt?" he said. It took Elias a moment to understand the question. "No," he said. "Are you?" "I'm fine." Lane paused. "What was that humming?" Elias picked up a fragment of the emitter, turned it over. The circuitry was unlike anything in cooperative inventory. Not American. Not Russian. Something else, something that felt engineered around a specific assumption about what it would be used against. He put the fragment in his jacket pocket. "I don't know yet," he said. Vera Marsh ran the story the next morning under the headline, "Convoy Ambushed, Government Device Recovered." She'd confirmed it through 3 federal sources before Elias had even finished his debrief. He sat across from her in the Tribune's conference room and watched her read the Wire report and thought, not for the first time, that she was the sharpest person he knew. "They left you," she said. "It wasn't a question. They left me. Why? I looked boring." He paused. "I work at looking boring." She looked at him over the top of the Wire report with an expression he'd learned to read as her knowing more than she was saying expression. "The federal people are calling you a hero," she said. "They want to give you a commendation. I'd rather they didn't. I know." She set the report down. "Ilias, these attackers. Where do you think they were taking Lane's device?" He hadn't told her about the emitter fragment. He thought about it. "Someone who already has infrastructure," he said. "Someone who knew the route, knew the timeline, knew which vehicle carried the prototype. That's not organized crime, that's institutional. And the frequency weapon." He kept his face still. "What about it?" "The agents in the follow vehicle. Their report says it incapacitated them. Both of them were wearing standard-issue body armor, carrying sidearms. Neither of them could move for approximately 90 seconds. Sonic disruption, probably. There are devices." "The frequency," Vera said, "was calibrated, not to human biology. The agents were collateral. Whatever that weapon was aimed at, whatever it was designed to affect, it wasn't them." In the silence that followed, a bus went past outside. Someone down the hall laughed at something. "I see," Elias said. "I thought you might." She slid a photograph across the table. "Dr. Seraphine Voss. She's been on the Science Division's consultant list for 4 years. 3 weeks ago, she was quietly removed. No public announcement. The division won't say why." He looked at the photograph. A woman in her 40s, angular features, dark hair, the kind of precise stillness in the eyes that meant she was always the most informed person in any room she entered. "What do you know about her?" he said. "Everything publicly available, which isn't much. What I know that isn't publicly available," Vera said, "is that she's been purchasing components. Quietly. Through shell companies. Components consistent with the fabrication of a second Lane device. She wants 2. She wants her own. Lane's is the government's. Hard to use, hard to access. If she builds her own," Vera spread her hands. Elias thought about the reducer ray, Doctor. Lane had explained it to him on the drive up. in the way scientists explained things to technicians who they didn't expect to fully understand. A directed energy projector, fed coordinates via targeting array, capable of delivering a focused destructive burst to a location miles distant. More precise than ordnance. No delivery vehicle required, no pilots, no soldiers within range of the target. The city would never know it was coming. Find her facility, he said. I'm working on it. Elias. She stopped. Be careful. Whatever that weapon does to you, whatever it was calibrated for, she knows it works. He nodded. He put on his careful face. He went back out into the city. The fragment told him more than he'd expected. He sat at his kitchen table with a borrowed spectrometer and a set of chemical references and spent 4 hours learning what he was looking at. The circuitry had been built to emit at a specific frequency band, one that had no particular effect on standard atmospheric chemistry, no particular effect on human neural tissue, no particular biological relevance at all, unless the target had cells structured around a particular protein lattice that existed nowhere in any human biology he could find documented. His biology, specifically. Someone had studied him, or studied something like him. The weapon existed because someone had done the science first, had identified the frequency that destabilized the particular cellular architecture he carried, had built a tool around that knowledge before ever deploying it in the field. He sat with that for a long time. Outside his window, the city made its evening noises. Traffic, voices, a dog, a child, someone playing a radio too loud on the floor above. All of it human. All of it happening without any knowledge that there was a man in a second-floor apartment who had come from somewhere else, who had fixed a rail in the dark, who had been weaponized against before he'd known the weaponizer existed. He thought about Jonas Korda, who had shown him, at age 9, how to wire a fuse box. Jonas had said, "When you don't know where the problem is, start at the source of the power and follow the line. Every failure has a path. You find the path, you find the fix." He found the path. It took him 11 days, 3 informants, a break-in to a university records office that he was not proud of, and Vera's network of regional correspondents. The facility was in the foothills, east of the city. An abandoned mining complex, the Dog's Eye, that had been quietly purchased through a holding company 18 months prior. The complex had been drawing power from a private grid for 7 months. Delivery manifests to an address 2 miles west. Always coded, always through cutouts, matched the component profile Vera had identified. He called Vera from a payphone. "Dog's Eye," he said. "The old mine, East Foothills. She's been there since spring." "I'm calling the federal liaison," Vera said immediately. "Give me 6 hours first. Ilias. She has the emitter technology. Federal agents go in first. She uses it. People get hurt. Let me clear the device before you send anyone in." A pause. He could hear Vera thinking, which was a particular quality of silence. 4 hours, she said, "and Elias. She'll know you're coming." "I know. She built that weapon for you." "I know. Then why?" "Because she built it," he said, "and I'm still here." He drove to the foothills in the company truck. He parked on the service road and walked the rest of the way in the dark, which wasn't difficult. He saw well in the dark, better than he had any right to. Another thing he'd never fully explained, and had stopped trying. The mine complex was 3 buildings around a central shaft head, all dark, all quiet, all watched. He felt the first emitter before he saw it, mounted on a post near the perimeter, automated, sweeping. The frequency was the same calibration as the handheld, but steady, broadcast rather than aimed. He felt it as a dull pressure in his chest, a dryness at the edges of thought. He moved through it quickly, didn't stop, got past the sweep radius, and stood with his back against the wall of the first building, breathing carefully. He'd come prepared, because Jonas had also said, "You don't face a known hazard without planning for it." He'd prepared. What he'd done in the 4 days before tonight was work out the shielding. The frequency operated on a specific mechanism. It wasn't sonic, it was electromagnetic, tuned to interact with the particular cellular structure he carried. Electromagnetic disruption was blockable by the right conductive medium. He'd spent 2 days with a materials engineer who owed him a favor, explaining, carefully, without explaining why, the frequency band and the disruption mechanism. What he'd gotten was a vest, thin, woven into the lining of a jacket, dense enough to attenuate the frequency by roughly 80%. 80% was not 100%. He could feel the remaining 20 as a background hum. It wasn't pleasant. He could work with unpleasant. He went in through a ventilation shaft because the doors were monitored and the shaft was not. He came out into a mechanical room full of generator equipment and the smell of burning insulation. And something else, something ozone-sharp that he recognized from Lane's description of the prototype. The reducer ray's distinctive field signature when powered. It was running. He moved through the facility the way he'd moved through the logging clearing. Quickly, quietly, with a deliberate minimalism of force. He found 2 men in the first corridor and left them unconscious. He found one in the second, who had time to raise an alarm before Elias crossed the distance. And after that the alarm was running, and the lights came up, and the facility was no longer quiet. He found Dr. Voss in the primary chamber. She was standing at a control console, and behind her was a machine the size of a car. All housing and cabling and a projector assembly that rotated slowly on a motorized mount. Beside her was a man Elias recognized from the file Vera had assembled. Anton Hackett, former government scientist, currently 3 years into a federal indictment he'd walked away from on a procedural technicality. He was working the targeting keyboard with the rapid practice motion of a man who'd done this before. And beside Hackett, in a lead line case sat open on a secondary table, was a piece of green glowing rock the size of Elias's fist. Kryptonite. He didn't know the word yet. He would learn it later from a government geological report that would sit classified for 20 years. But he knew the rock. He knew it the way he'd known the emitter. Not cognitively, not by analysis, but by the body's immediate deep cellular complaint. Even through the shielding vest, even at 20 feet. It was worse than the emitter. It was like the difference between a headache and a seizure. He felt his hands lose their steadiness. He felt the edges of the room do something wrong. Dr. Voss turned from the console. She was exactly as the photograph, angular, precise, still. She looked at him the way a scientist looks at a result she'd predicted but still found interesting. "You're wearing lead," she said. It wasn't a question. He understood then that she'd seen him come through the emitter field and was already updating her model. "Field technician," he said, which was what he always said, which bought him almost nothing here. "Mr. Korda." She said his name the way people said the names of subjects in papers they'd authored. "I've been studying you for 3 years. The Henley mine collapse, the Meridian Bridge failure, the grain silo in Cartwell. There were 15 incidents over 4 years before that, documented in local records, that I compiled into a profile. You have remarkable," she paused, something behind the precision flickering, "properties." "Where are you targeting the device?" he said. "The Daily Planet building," she said. "At 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. A warning, for the Science Division, for the Federal Bureau, for everyone who has been making my professional life." She stopped, restarted. "For everyone who decided I was an obstacle. People will die. People in the way of power always die, Mr. Korda. It's a historical constant." She reached for the kryptonite case. "You're going to step back now." He didn't step back. He was very sick. The rock, even in her hand, even at the distance she was maintaining, was making him fundamentally wrong, in ways he couldn't fully articulate. The gray at the edges of thought was becoming structural. His bones felt like they were having a separate conversation with gravity from the one the rest of him was having. He was aware, in a precise and clinical way, that if she moved 3 steps closer he was probably going to fall. He stood where he was. "I know what this does to you," she said. She took 1 step. The gray went darker. "I've modeled it extensively. At 1 meter you experience approximately 60% loss of gross motor function. At half a meter you lose consciousness." Another step. "The lead lining attenuates the electromagnetic emitters. It does not attenuate this. This is radiological, specifically radiological." "Specifically," she said. "To your biology." He was thinking, through the gray, about the vest, about the shielding, about the conversation with the materials engineer, about Jonas, who had said, "Follow the line." He had followed the line. All of it. He had known, coming in here, what she would have. He had prepared for the emitters. He had not prepared for the rock, because you could not prepare for the rock, because there was no shielding that covered radiological threat at this wavelength without being too heavy to wear, without announcing exactly what you were before you walked in the door. But he had prepared for something else. He had prepared for the machine, while Dr. Voss was watching his face, while Hackett was still at the targeting keyboard, while the reducer ray rotated slowly on its mount, and the green glow pulsed, and the gray made his hands feel like someone else's hands. Elias Korda was also doing the thing that he'd learned to do at age 9 in a fuse box, following the power. The machine was massive. Its power draw was enormous. He'd confirmed that from the grid records Vera had accessed. It needed a stable, uninterrupted supply to maintain targeting lock. The power came through 2 primary conduits in the floor housing, thick armored cable running from the generator room. He'd seen them on his way in. He fell. He let himself fall. He went down hard on one knee and he heard Dr. Voss say something to Hackett in a low voice. Something like almost there or not long now. And he put his hand on the floor and felt the vibration of the cable housing under the concrete. Felt the current in it through his palm, the way he felt everything. More than the hand should allow. The particular sensitivity that had no name in any catalog of human ability. Then he drove his fist through the floor, not elegantly, not cleanly. He drove it through 12 centimeters of reinforced concrete and the armored cable housing below it, and the armored cable shredded. And the current found the new path Elias had provided, and the reducer ray's targeting array went dark mid-rotation with a sound like every light in the building sighing at once. In the dark, he moved. He moved like he moved when he didn't care whether anyone understood it. Across the room, the green glow his only reference point. One hand closing on the kryptonite at a distance that would have hurt worse if he'd been closer for longer. He put it back in the lead-lined case. He closed the case. He set the case on the floor, on the far side of the room. The gray receded. Slowly, not instantly, not like throwing a switch, but like dawn, gradually. And then all at once, his hands steadied. The edges of the room returned to their proper right angles. He found the light switch. Dr. Voss was standing at her console in the half-dark, the dead machine behind her. Two of her men unconscious in the corridor she could hear had just happened. Hackett very carefully stepping away from the targeting keyboard with his hands visible. She looked at Elias. The lead lining, she said. You expected me to have the stone. You'd built the emitters to a specific frequency, he said. Someone who'd done that research would know about the radiological vulnerability too. If you knew about one, you'd have the other ready. So you let yourself fall. I needed you watching my face, he said, instead of my hands. She was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of defeat. The quiet of a scientist revising a result that had come in differently than the model predicted. There was something in it, almost, that he recognized. The recalibration. The honest accounting. 3 years of research, she said. I know. You're not. She stopped. What are you? He thought about that. About Jonas and Ruth. About the rail in the dark. About the 9-year-old who'd rewired a fuse box and been careful ever since. I'm from here, he said. That's the only answer I've got. The federal team arrived 40 minutes later, which was 36 minutes after Vera's deadline. He found this, in the circumstances, forgivable. He met them at the entrance with Voss and Hackett zip-tied, and the rest of her men sitting in a row against the wall, and the reducer ray's targeting array thoroughly disassembled. He'd spent the waiting time making sure it couldn't be easily reassembled by anyone who came along later. The lead agent, a compact woman named Reyes, looked at the room and looked at Elias. Field technician, she said. That's right. She looked at the hole in the concrete floor, at the shredded armored cable, at the disassembled targeting array. We're going to need you to come in for a debrief, she said. Of course, he said. And then, Agent Reyes. The emitter technology she was using, the frequency devices. Those exist somewhere in her research, whatever she published, whatever she didn't publish. I'd like those files classified. Reyes studied him. Any reason? Professional preference, he said. It was the wrong answer. It was also, he thought, the only true one. Vera ran the story the next morning. Criminal scientist arrested, weapon foiled. She ran it without Elias's name, per the arrangement they'd made and never explicitly discussed. And she ran the quote from Agent Reyes about federal cooperation and the successful protection of civilian infrastructure. And she ran a sidebar on Dr. Lane's reducer ray and the science division's plans for its study at Aldridge University. What she didn't run, what she never ran, was the photograph she'd taken 3 months earlier of Elias coming out of the river after the Cartwell Bridge failure. She kept it in her desk drawer, in an envelope that said only Corda on the tab. She'd looked at it enough times to know what it showed. A man carrying 2 children, one under each arm, who was moving faster than a photograph should have been able to capture. Just slightly blurred at the edges in the way that fast things are. She'd looked at it. She'd put it away. She'd called him a field technician in every story. She was going to keep doing that, for as long as it took. For as long as the city needed someone it didn't have to be afraid of. He came by the office that afternoon. He sat across from her desk with his careful face and his unnecessary glasses, and she slid a coffee across the desk to him without being asked, because she'd been making him coffee for 3 years, and he still always looked surprised that she remembered how he took it. The emitter files, she said. Did Reyes agree? Pending review, he said. Probably yes. It's in their interest, too. If the technology circulates, It becomes a tactical variable they can't control. And the rock. He looked at his coffee. Classified already. Different jurisdiction. Above Reyes's pay grade. Is there more of it? Almost certainly. He paused. It came from somewhere. It doesn't come from here. She let that sit. Outside the window, the afternoon was bright and ordinary. Pedestrians, a newspaper stand, a child walking a dog too large for its leash. Elias, she said, are you all right? He considered the question with his whole face, which was something he rarely did. Usually the careful face held everything in its particular practiced stillness. Today there was something around the eyes that she couldn't categorize. Something that might have been the specific exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying a thing alone for a very long time. Working on it, he said. She nodded. She didn't push. She thought, there are things in this city that I write about, and things I keep quiet because keeping quiet is how they keep working. And I have been in this business long enough to know which is which. She thought. He fixed the rail in the dark. Nobody asked him. Nobody knew. He fixed it because it was broken, and the train was coming, and it was the thing to do. She thought that was, in the end, the only answer that mattered. He finished his coffee. He put on his jacket, the reinforced one, the one with the lead-woven lining that she had noticed weeks ago and not mentioned. He put on his careful face. He went back out into the city. 2 blocks north, the traffic light at Harrison and 5th had been stuck on red for 20 minutes. 3 cars, a city bus, and a very annoyed bicycle courier were piling up. Elias looked at it as he passed. He thought about the intersection. He thought about the bus driver. He found the junction box on the light pole. It was locked, but the lock was a standard municipal model, and he'd carried a universal key since the 3rd week he'd been in this city, which told you something about the kind of person he was. He opened the box. He looked at the wiring. He found the fault in about 4 seconds. A corroded connection on the timing relay, simple boring, completely fixable. He fixed it. The light cycled. The traffic moved. The bicycle courier shot him a look as he rolled past that was somewhere between suspicion and gratitude. Elias closed the junction box. He put his glasses back on. He walked to the corner and waited for the next light, which was green, which meant he could cross. He crossed. The city went on around him. Loud, provisional, full of things breaking and being fixed and breaking again, and being fixed again by whoever happened to be there. Not always the right person. Not always with the right tools. Sometimes with nothing but stubbornness, and the conviction that the train was coming, and the rail was bent, and someone had to be the someone. He thought about the rock. About the fact that somewhere in the geological record of a dead planet, the specific radioactive signature that made him sick was sitting in a meteorological database, waiting to be found and found again by whoever wanted a lever. He thought about Vera's drawer and the photograph in the envelope, and the quiet agreement they'd never spoken aloud. He thought, there are things I am that I don't have words for yet. There are things I came from that I will spend my whole life not fully knowing. There are people in this city who will try to use what I am against me, who will study me and build instruments, and come at the specific vulnerability with everything they have. He thought, they'll have to. He thought, I'll still be here. The afternoon light was doing that thing it did sometimes in October, low and gold and long-shadowed, making ordinary buildings into something that looked, just for a moment, like something worth protecting. A woman laughed in the doorway of a deli. 2 men argued cheerfully over something in a language he didn't speak. A kid on a bicycle hit a puddle and yelled and laughed at the same time, all in the same breath. Human, all of it. Messy, provisional, loud, alive. He breathed it in. He walked home through the long shadows. He'd fix whatever broke next. That was the job. That was always going to be the job. Up ahead, on the 6th floor of a building he was about to pass, a window came open, and someone leaned out and dropped a set of keys, and the keys fell 6 floors toward the sidewalk, and Elias, without breaking stride, caught them. He looked up. Old woman, alarmed face, embarrassed face. He held the keys up. She laughed, surprised. He put on his careful face. He found the building door. He went up the stairs.